Welcome yet again, everybody, to another edition, a Monday edition of the Young Turks. But it's such a big news Monday. I'm used to coming on for big news days. If you guys watch other shows on the network, we had to bring in more big guns for somewhere on the East Coast. I can't keep track anymore. We have Emma Vigeland joining me also to speak about the big news of the day. How you doing, Emma?
I'm doing good. I like being referred to as one of the big guns, even though we are a pro gun control show, obviously.
Hey, these guns are being controlled right now under certain circumstances. We got many people who are making sure the guns are being portrayed the right way in dual screens and make sure things are said right. So I think the gun control still applies. Just go ahead and let a few fly, and I think we'll all be good today.
That's what they called our hiring process, gun control.
All right. I forgot about that part. But before we get to more things, obviously I already pointed out the big news, but before we get to more of it, let's go through the normal parameters of the show. As you guys already know, TYT is funded by you guys. You guys are us. Without you guys, we can't do what we do. We say it every day and we mean it every day. So let's check out what we have as far as the contributions go for the network as well. So TYT is different than other outlets because we are powered by you, as I pointed out. The mainstream media will give us both sides of every issue instead of giving us the information objectively just the way it is. You guys make that coverage go. So please donate as usual at tyt.com/go. We'll see where we get today. Cenk likes to make certain goals, lofty goals to reach each day. You know what I'd like to make a goal of? That you guys give what you can and what you love to do. Based off of the information that's provided for you, the passion that is given, do what's on your heart. And one more point of our process of what we do every day on the show is we have tomorrow a TY Tarantino special. I think I threw that off wrong. The TY Tarantino special. You'll have some of the old school hosts, Cenk, of course, Anna, Ben, John, Dave Kohler for you old heads, and Jesus Godoy for you other old heads. And of course, myself will be all joining at different points of the evening to talk about our time at TYT. What could have been different if small differences, if just one other job opportunity had taken us away, which all of us have had those chances come across, or even just if we decided to get sick of doing this whole progressive news thing and we decided to go for some more conservative news. Which one of us could have done something like that? We might find out tomorrow. Let's have some stories and really have some fun. But before we get to that tomorrow, let's get to this today. Emma.
Let's do it. The Senate Judiciary Committee kicked off its Amy Coney Barrett confirmation hearings today. And if this process seems rushed to you, you're not the only one, because it seems like Barrett may have skipped some details in her disclosures, what she needed to provide to the Senate. So it's day one of Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett's confirmation hearings, and Senate Judiciary Committee Democrats are already wondering out loud if Barrett lied by omission in her Senate questionnaire. Ranking member Senator Dianne Feinstein and all of the other Judiciary Committee Democrats, Senator Kamala Harris included, said in a letter to Assistant Attorney General Beth A. Williams that they find Judge Barrett's incomplete Senate Judiciary questionnaire to be troubling. Democrats focused on 3 omissions in particular, the first 2 of them having to do with Barrett's pro-life activities. On the first 2, Democrats suggested that it was telling that Barrett and Williams didn't disclose Barrett's speeches on Roe v. Wade and her signing of a pro-life ad until after the media found out. So that included 2 2013 talks as well as an advertisement that Judge Barrett signed on to as a member of Notre Dame's University's Faculty for Life. That was some sort of group there. And there's also more that she didn't disclose. Press reports have also revealed that Judge Barrett failed to disclose to the committee her legal work as one of 2 lead attorneys who defended a Pittsburgh steel magnate accused of orchestrating the bankruptcy of a major Pennsylvania hospital system, the letter continued. Presumably, Democrats are interested in playing this detail up because they see Barrett as the end of the Affordable Care Act, rightly so. Democrats said all of this raises questions about Barrett's candor to the Senate Judiciary Committee and raises serious concerns that the Republican orchestrated sprint to confirm Barrett before the election has resulted in a shoddy confirmation process. So I would say it's both. She clearly meant to obfuscate and hide some of these details, but it's shoddy, the process itself, because we also see that it's rushed. It's rushed on purpose. Trump has said that it's going to be rushed. They want to get the nomination in before the election, completely undercutting the past precedent that Republicans tried to set, which we'll get to later. But before I get into the things that she did disclose that are troubling and I don't think are reported on enough, what do you have to say about all this, Jayar?
Well, the first question I always wonder whenever things like this happen, these obvious omissions or straight lies, or really trying to hide records from the American people, and also maybe senators that are gonna ask her about it, is the assumption that maybe they can get away with it. And that's always the first thing whenever anybody does something wrong, or maybe cuts some corners, or maybe lies on a resume. Not necessarily what was happening here as far as lying on a resume, but at least omitting things that could be brought up, is maybe no one will notice. There's no way that I don't think there's any way that they potentially thought that. When you're gonna go through a Supreme Court nominee in a contentious point right before an election to potentially oust a president that is outrageously unpopular, do you think that they accidentally forgot these major things about her record? No, I don't think there's much of a chance that they forgot, or she forgot before putting them in. These are things that they didn't want to have ammunition maybe put forward. But in reality, if they continue to go down the same line that they've been through in anything that this administration does, or if its supporters does, is who cares? Everything we do, we know that opposition is gonna point it out and call out the negative things about it and how it's bad for the country. And our side is gonna excuse it no matter what. I don't know why they didn't continue down this same path, because now it adds an extra layer for Democrats to say, hey, look, they omitted these things. It sounds like they're not very proud of these aspects of her record. They're not proud of the fact that she was working to try and openly be against women's rights and these type of things that we know is gonna come up. And also Affordable Care Act, maybe getting in time to subvert another election. All these things are gonna come up. You might as well admit it from the beginning, but I don't know, maybe it'll work no matter what they do, because we're tearing down a freeway at rapid speeds of lying and being incoherent to the American people. So why would they start now? I'm still trying to find an answer to that part of the question.
Well, there's no incentive not to lie. There's no incentive to be truthful in the modern Republican Party. One, the Democrats are terrible at holding Republicans accountable here, but basically the calculation was, maybe they won't catch this. And if they do, so what? We know the Republicans are gonna rubber stamp her nomination anyway if the Democrats do allow this procedurally. So I totally agree with you, Jayar. But in terms of her election integrity, I think that's a really important topic. And it is something that she did disclose, I believe, in her records. But even that is troubling in itself, the details of it. So some great reporting from Ari Berman of Mother Jones. The article came out yesterday. Justices John Roberts and Brett Kavanaugh worked on George W. Bush's legal team during the 2000 Florida recount and successfully intervened to stop Democratic ballots from being counted. If confirmed, Barrett would be a third justice who worked for Republicans during the Florida recount, increasing the likelihood that the court, with a 6-3 conservative majority, would side with Trump in a post-election dispute, even if the facts and the law aren't on the president's side. On her questionnaire for the Senate Judiciary Committee, Barrett said she provided research and briefing assistance on Bush v. Gore as a young associate with Miller, Cassidy, LaRocca, and Lewin. I worked on the case on location in Florida for about a week at the outset of the litigation, she wrote. Barrett said she worked in Florida with Stuart Levy, a partner at the firm who is now head of the Libra Association, a cryptocurrency organization started by Facebook. According to court records and interviews with lawyers involved in the 2000 recount, Levy and Barrett worked not just on Bush v. Gore, but on two little known but pivotal related cases during the recount. In those cases, Republicans sought to count mail ballots that were disputed by Democrats because of evidence that Republican operatives had altered incomplete absentee ballot request forms. That position stands in sharp contrast to Trump's current assault on mail voting, but there's a certain consistency here. Republicans will take whatever stance on mail ballots maximizes their electoral chances, and Barrett's work in 2000 suggests she might be willing to play along. I would say might is not the accurate word. I would editorialize on the reporting here and say she would absolutely play along. There is this fiction that everyone in Washington, with outside of a select few progressives, have decided they're going to go along with. that the judiciary is impartial and that it's 1812 and they don't have access to newspapers or CNN and they don't read the news and they just look at the merits of the case and decide from there. And it's based on their judicial philosophy that's independent of politics. BS, obviously. Barrett, if she gets on the court, and Trump has said, I think the Supreme Court is going to be involved in litigation about the outcome of the election, we know she's going to side with Trump. It needs to be enough of a landslide that that case is undercut, but there's a very good chance that it's not just bluster from Trump, that he is going to challenge the legitimacy of the election in court. And we now know from Barrett's past that she helped Republicans stop the Democratic recounts, stop ballots from being counted where Gore would have won, and handed the election to George W. Bush prematurely. She could do the same thing here. With Trump, stranger things have happened.
Yeah, we were just talking about how the potential oversight that she may have had with putting certain things in her record or in the process for her being nominated that we're discovering now. But things like this, none of this is a mistake either. So even back in 2000, when she's working on this is your resume for a positive thing for the Republican Party to nominate you. There's several people that I'm sure the president could have nominated to the Supreme Court that would have been, rushed through the same process as she has. But when you do something like this from back in the day like that, you are setting yourselves up to be accepted by this Republican Party as a positive character here. So this isn't just a Trump thing. This is a buildup for 20 years now. This was 20 years ago. The Republican Party knows this about her. They know who she worked with. They know her background. This is something that's a resume builder for her. So usually you want to hide some of the things you may have worked on or maybe not participate on certain things when anybody in her position, I'm sure, had aspirations of maybe being on the Supreme Court at some point. So in doing so, you forge a path. People in these types of positions forge a path. There's people that want to run for president 16 years from now, right? And they're thinking about it. They're positioning themselves. I think it's similar with Supreme Court justice. I think she positioned herself with work on things like the Bush v. Gore, and now these are paying off. And it's perfect. You have a president in place that would love to have another Supreme Court justice come in and do the same thing, or maybe have a larger role in a similar role that she played back in the day. It all adds up. This is an entire Republican Party process and problem, not just a Donald Trump problem. They're like, hey, we got Donald Trump in place. He can help us push this through because we always want to have as many justices on the Supreme Court as possible that would do our bidding, that have nothing to do with actually judging based off of the Constitution or the law.
Yeah, and that's why it's just so important not to rehabilitate the Republican Party and have them distance themselves from Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
Donald Trump is exactly who they are. All the judicial appointments are in line with who Republicans would appoint, and policy-wise, they're identical too. It's just in the style and the wrecking ball nature of Trump. That's the difference.
It's all they need, and it's all they're looking for. And again, when you've never been held to account, you don't think you'll ever have to be. And this is where we stand now.
Yeah.
It's a good start. This is some positive news.
This is where we stand now. Everything sucks. But people who suck, that continues with the next topic, I think.
Yeah, so we've already been diving into Supreme Court nomination processes that day one kicked off. There was a couple of extra wrinkles that we saw occurring because, as we already saw a week or two ago, President of the United States tested positive for COVID-19. He was at the event that announced the nomination of the Supreme Court Justice Coney Barrett for the Supreme Court, and Mike Lee, the senator from Ohio, Republican senator from Utah, Mike Lee was also at that event, and he just announced on October 2nd that he also tested positive for COVID-19. So fresh off of that positive announcement, at least, I'm not sure when the test was actually taken, he decided to show up at the confirmation hearing as if nothing had ever happened, partially masked. Let's take a look at his quick, close conversation with Lindsey Graham before the hearings began. I want to point out a couple things that are happening here. Mike Lee speaking very closely with Lindsey Graham, maybe about strategies about what they're going to do today for the particular day. Maybe they want to trade a couple of new germs and see what they want to get. But I want to look closely at Mike Lee's face. He's just about to finally pull the mask above his nose. So just in case you didn't see it, I want to give like a good play-by-play there of just, we've seen frustrations that people have with mask wearing and how to wear it correctly. Maybe don't drop it under your nose because there's a respiratory system that we have. You can inhale air through your mouth. You can inhale air through your nose. I don't know if people know that.
What? Breaking news on the Young Turks. Jesus.
I'm just saying, maybe you should check the CDC guidelines to maybe can guide you to the correct way to put on a mask and to understand that airways are available through both your nose and your mouth. So there's Mike Lee with his airway open and available. But that's the thing. He had a bit of a, well, actually, no, before we get to his excuses to why he did this, he went and took his opening statement with a little bit more of an extreme look. So let's have a listen for the first 30 seconds or first few seconds of his opening statement. You don't really have to care what he has to say. Just look at what he did.
I'll be participating in person. I've gotten the sign off from the Office of the Attending Physician. I've gone through the appropriate number of days, and I've been keeping my temperature under control, and I'm no longer contagious.
Well, that is great news. That's like the president is no longer a transmission threat. Given that you're not a risk of transmission, can you be closer to other people?
We'll all be seated 6 feet apart, regardless of whether we've had it.
Apologies, that's Mike Lee on the Hugh Hewitt show talking about what everyone's going to be upset about when he showed up without honestly, I think adhering to the guidelines for what most people have to do whenever they come up with a positive COVID test. So he spoke with Hugh Hewitt. Apparently, the attending physician said that he's following all the rules to stay in place in order to show up, and apparently he did. But now let's go to the quick opening statement that Mike Lee had when he ditched his mask.
Judge Barrett, you and I have a number of things in common. We're both raised in large families. In fact, we're both one of 7 children. In your case, as I recall, you're the oldest of 7 children, which means that long before you had your own 7 children, you were also the de facto mother to many others.
So I think as you could imagine, Republican senators, just like the Democratic senators were talking to a liberal nominee for the Supreme Court, they would talk about how great she is and how personable she is and how much they have in common, and they're all come from big families, things that have nothing to do with that she's being nominated, but at least want to give her a human side when people are attacking things that she would rule on. So this is one of the reasons that he decided to come back to the hearing to make sure this all went down. From the Independent, they pointed out that the presence of Senator Lee assures that the Republicans will have a quorum present to move ahead with the votes in committee. So I think last week, as Cenk and Anna were pointing out, whenever, unless they have enough senators on board to push these things through, and the COVID test kind of derailed that, they want to make sure that this still this continues on. So continuing on, Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, who's another committee member who also tested positive for the virus. He's no longer experiencing symptoms either, according to both them and their camps. And he has returned to work virtually. He did not show up in person, but Mike Lee felt that he had to at least show his face and pull another Trump. So, Senator, before I let you jump in, Emma, really quick, Lindsey Graham, who's the chair of the Judiciary Committee, he also opened proceedings saying, as to the hearing room, I doubt if there's any room in the country that's been giving more attention and detail to make sure that it's CDC compliant. So the question is, are they CDC compliant, as Lindsey Graham pointed out? From the CDC guidelines, it does say that you can be around others after you've had a positive test for these 3 components: 10 days since the symptoms first appeared, 24 hours with no fever without the use of fever-reducing medications, and other symptoms of COVID-19 are improving. The asterisk there is talking about you could potentially still have a loss of taste and all those other symptoms for longer than this, so you can understand how this is all is working. But the one point I want to point out with these things, the second half of that second parameter, without the use of fever-reducing medications to lower your fever, if we remember what Mike Lee just said to Hugh Hewitt this morning was, I got my fever under control and we're regulating it in a way. There was a specific term he used that it seems like they're kind of keeping his temperature under control to make sure that he can come in. So that's the only caveat I have. But the CDC guidelines does say 10 days later. He came in and said it on October 2nd. Today is October 12th. We have exactly 10 days. The question is, should he have still done this?
I mean, absolutely not. I think it's reckless because we don't know much about this virus. I mean, I understand what the CDC guidelines say, but there is other research that says it could be a little bit longer than that. And there is conflicting information out there. We know baseline information about the efficacy of masks and how being outdoors is helpful, but we don't know everything. We are still learning day by day, which I know frustrates people. They wish that all the information was available, but that's not possible right now. So perhaps out of an abundance of caution, respect for your colleagues, respect for the reporters in the room, respect for this other member of a 7-child family, Amy Coney Barrett, respect for the people that work in the facility, maybe just don't do it. Don't go in that day, because you know who participated virtually? Kamala Harris, for one, who's on the committee, and Ted Cruz. Why did Ted Cruz participate virtually? He came into contact with Mike Lee, and he chose to self-quarantine and participated virtually. But the guy he came into contact with showed up and talked closely with Senator Lindsey Graham with his mask beneath his nose, and then took it off to go on some diatribe about big families, and also talked at length about how the judiciary is the only non-political branch in this country, which drives me insane because that's clearly not the case anymore in the year 2020 and hasn't been for many decades. So he is a bummer because Mike Lee likes to pretend he's this principled libertarian, and he can join with Bernie Sanders on anti-war bills and other things like getting out of Yemen, which I can appreciate. And I'm like, oh, this is maybe someone on the right that we could potentially work with towards some sort of solution. And then he comes out like the clown he is. It's the same thing with Rand Paul. Those are the two guys in the Senate who will work with progressives on anti-war legislation, getting out of our overseas horrific, bloody entanglements. And then they reveal themselves for who they are. They are not principled. They don't care about life. They say they care about all lives matter, but except their colleagues and everyone they're in the room with. All he needed to do would just be quarantined a little bit longer and participate virtually. But then you wouldn't be able to put on a show for your constituents and for Republicans nationally. And that's really what this was about.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make a showing of it. And again, it's follow the leader. We saw what Donald Trump did last week. So it's follow the leader. And I think Hugh Hewitt even pointed out with him, because, oh, just like your buddy Trump, like you guys just come out strong and in full force. It's like as if there's some superpower that elected Republican officials have that other folks in the country don't have. Or maybe it's access to certain kind of treatment that other people in the country, maybe it's that part, I don't know. We'll figure all this. We'll answer all the questions to these burning things that humans have been trying to figure out since the beginning of time when we come back from this break. But we will be talking about more of the Supreme Court confirmation hearings, this time with Senator Lindsey Graham, who was one of the main voices that was in support of this nomination process, who was also 100% against the nomination process back in 2016 when Merrick Garland was nominated to the court. Let's find out what this clown has to say after
we need to talk about a relatively new show called the Republic, or UNFTR. As a Young Turks fan, you already know that the government, the media, and corporations are constantly peddling lies that serve the interests of the rich and powerful. But now there's a podcast dedicated to unraveling those lies, debunking the conventional wisdom. In each episode of the Republic, or UNFTR, the host delves into a different historical episode or topic that's generally misunderstood or purposely obfuscated by the so-called powers that be, featuring in-depth research, razor-sharp commentary, and just the right amount of vulgarity. The UNFTR podcast takes a sledgehammer to what you thought you knew about some of the nation's most sacred historical cows. But don't just take my word for it. The New York Times described UNFTR as consistently compelling and educational, aiming to challenge conventional wisdom and upend the historical narratives that were taught in school. For as the great philosopher Yoda once put it, you must unlearn what you have learned. And that's true whether you're in Jedi training or you're uprooting and exposing all the propaganda and disinformation you've been fed over the course of your lifetime. So search for UNFDR in your podcast app today and get ready to get informed, angered, and entertained all at the same time.
Get back. Everybody. Welcome back, everybody. Hey, Jayar Jackson, Emma Vigeland, the disgruntled Emma Vigeland, because little inside baseball, her New York Giants aren't doing well. That's all.
Yeah, we all know. I thought we talked about this before we went on air, so we didn't have to talk about this.
We don't have to talk about it. We don't have to talk about it.
It's legitimately affected my mental health. Like, it is hurting me. Because I hate Dave Gettleman more than Trump.
The question is, it's so weird you said it. The question is which Republican would you vote for to have the Giants, in order to suddenly give the Giants a winning season? I mean, a playoff winning season where they at least go to the NFC Championship game.
Oh, well, obviously a conscientious Republican like Ted Cruz. No, I couldn't do that. I'd give up the Giants forever if we could have like Bernie Sanders and leftism reign supreme.
So there are a few people that are in a good mood outside of, unlike Emma, at our TYT members. The comments section with our members, Meg says, Jayar and Emma, exclamation point. What an excellent surprise. Well, what do you know? What an excellent surprise. I don't like to tell you guys when I'm gonna come on until right before I come on, just to make it an excellent surprise. Or maybe when you're expecting to see Jenk's face and you see mine, you're like, wow, what an excellent surprise. No more trigonometry says, I couldn't even follow the hearings. The GOP will spout a bunch of nonsense, and we all know it's how it's going to end. That's basically what Lindsey Graham said in some of his opening statements. Also, Jacob Wool's last merit says, my wife is an ER nurse. Mike Lee is still 100% COVID positive, and she says healthcare workers would still be in gowns, masks, eye protection, and face shields around him. At this point, despite the CDC guidelines, he's putting the entire Senate at risk. I think a lot of us know nurses, and we've seen the things that they've gone through, and emergency workers during this whole thing. And honestly, whenever we have to quarantine, it's 14 days. The CDC guidelines does say 10, but I'm not sure how many regular folks have to follow those guidelines. So take that as you may. Emma, we have some more fun things?
Well, let's do it. Let's make fun of Lindsey Graham for a little bit, shall we? Lindsey Graham knows that he is a massive hypocrite, but he's trying to explain it away. Here is what he had to say for himself at the Amy Coney Barrett hearings today.
What will happen is that my Democratic colleagues will say, this has never been done, and they're right in this regard. Nobody's, I think, has ever been confirmed in an election year past July. The bottom line is Justice Ginsburg, when asked about this several years ago, said that a president serves for 4 years, not 3. There's nothing unconstitutional about this process. This is a vacancy that's occurred through a tragic loss of a great woman, and we're going to fill that vacancy with another great woman. The bottom line here is that the Senate is doing its duty constitutionally. And we can talk about history, but here's the history as I understand it. There's never been a situation where you had a president of one party and the Senate of another, where the nominee, the replacement was made in an election year. It's been over 140 years ago. All I can say is that I feel that we're doing this constitutionally. Our Democratic friends object to the process. I respect them all.
Yeah, I mean, he's like giving all of these explanations. Oh, we're starting the hearings on a Monday in October, which means it's fall, which means that the sun is perfectly aligned on Amy Coney Barrett's face. So that makes it actually totally normal and not hypocritical, except he knows he's a hypocrite. The problem is, and this is, I think, a light bulb moment for liberals, They don't care about being called hypocrites. They don't care about hypocrisy shaming, even though it's fun and gratifying for us, much like those Lincoln Project ads that actually don't win anybody over. It doesn't do anything for them. Lindsey Graham knows he's a hypocrite. This is what he said in March 2016, as you guys will likely remember. I want you to use my words against me. If there's a Republican president in 2016 and a vacancy occurs in the last year of his first term, you can say Lindsey Graham said, let's let the next president, whoever it might be, make that nomination, and you could use my words against me and you'd be absolutely right. Okay, I do think though that there is a limit to how much hypocrisy people can handle. So Republicans strategically just blow past it with just force of will. And they're way better at that than Democrats, who are extremely weak, obviously. Just, okay, that's kind of their entire philosophy when it comes to strategy against the GOP. But fortunately, the opponent to Lindsey Graham in South Carolina is using this hypocrisy to seemingly pretty good effect. He's quite well funded, and this could be, in a year that's a referendum on Trump, something that could potentially sink Lindsey Graham, and he has to calculate for that. So Jamie Harrison, the Democrat challenging Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, raised an astonishing $57 million from July through September, the highest quarterly fundraising total for any Senate candidate in US history, and part of a flood of Democratic money remaking the battle for the control of the Senate. Before this year, the biggest quarterly haul for a Senate candidate was $38 million, raised by former Representative Beto O'Rourke of Texas during his unsuccessful challenge to Senator Ted Cruz in 2018. So doesn't bode exactly well for Jamie Harrison, but Mr. Harrison blew past that by nearly $20 million, raising more than twice as much in a single quarter as Mr. Graham reported raising in the previous 6 quarters combined. Mr. Graham has not yet announced his third quarter numbers, which means they're probably bad. Money, of course, does not guarantee victory, and Mr. Graham is still running in a conservative state that has not sent a Democrat to the Senate in more than 2 decades. Recent polls have shown a dead heat in a Quinnipiac University survey late last month. Mr. Graham and Mr. Harrison were tied at 48%, with 95% of likely voters saying their minds were made up. The campaign received 1.5 million donations from 994,000 donors, according to Mr. Harrison's campaign, and the average contribution was $37. But much of that money came from out-of-state donors, which raises questions about how much it reflects the sentiments of South Carolina voters versus the feelings of the national electorate, much like the Beto O'Rourke race I mentioned before. Mr. Graham's reversal on seating a Supreme Court justice in an election year has enraged liberal donors nationally, says Curtis Loftus, the Republican state treasurer, but not necessarily as many voters in South Carolina. But you are a Republican saying that, the man quoted there. The polls don't reflect that it has caused a shift. I would say that it's more anti-Trump sentiment than anything. But Jayar, I want your thoughts on this, because I do think Harrison is mounting a very significant challenge to Graham. And the fact that Graham is so public in the weeks leading up to his reelection effort could hurt him, because he's so insanely shameless as the most prominent voice on the Judiciary Committee in these hearings.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if he feels this is his last gasp, because he went on Hannity, he went on other Fox News shows. We're talking about Lindsey Graham, and spoke about how he needs help. Help me now, help me again, about every time that he was getting destroyed money-wise by Jamie Harrison. And he said, they just hate me. Oh boy, do they just hate me. These are the reasons why they just hate you. So anytime a Republican begins to feel a little bit of a sense of a consequence for the things that they've done, it's just people just hate me. They hate me, so I need you guys to help me because the haters hate me. Or maybe you did something to cause people to dislike you. Maybe your policies are anti-American. Maybe you're not representing the people that elected you before. Maybe you never represented the people that elected you, and they're just now finding out that you're the person who never represented them. And there's many times that you can hold their words against them, as Lindsey Graham pointed out. And hopefully on November 3rd, enough people that are put in a place to vote against him will hold his words against him. That's kind of the only way now, because they know this is the last thing that they can possibly do, which is shove through another Supreme Court nominee and show up the hypocrisy all you want. And if Lindsey Graham goes riding off into the woods, into non-existence, he doesn't care. He's still rich. He still had his time in the Senate, and then he still had a chance to put in one more Supreme Court justice on the basis of hypocrisy to lead his legacy, that he can get patted on the back at all of his fundraising events and all of the whatever lobbying he may get into later. As long as he's done his job, that's a good soldier that has been honorably discharged from the Republican Party, or at least of elected officials of the Republican Party. I have a list of a few other things we can hold Republicans accountable for. The way that Lindsey Graham says, hold his feet to the fire, use it against me. We can use this against them. That they said they're going to create a healthcare plan and they're going to get rid of pre-existing conditions when it comes to under Obamacare. I'm still looking for that healthcare plan. Trump said he's going to lower drug prices from the most favored nations proposal. That thing got delayed because pharmaceutical companies said, no, you're not going to do that. Hold that over their heads as well. Remember when Ivanka Trump was hanging out with her father and they said they're gonna have 6 weeks of paid leave for new moms? Remember that? Hold that over their heads. There's more things than just this we can hold over their heads. Infrastructure, he said, infrastructure. He pulled back on infrastructure because he wanted the Democrats, who they were talking about infrastructure plans, wanted Democrats to stop investigating him and his Russian ties. That's how much he cares about infrastructure in this country. He's gonna lower the national debt. It's increased by like $7-8 trillion. Tax cuts. Remember those tax cuts for the middle class that actually benefit the richest Americans? And then a few middle class folks got it, but then by 10-15 years from now, 87% of the tax cuts are going to be all benefiting the richest 1% of people in our country. These are the things that we can hold over the Republican Party, not just Donald Trump and the Republican Party, because he can't do what he does without his enablers. His enablers put him in this position, and now they're using him for one last gasp to get the Supreme Court nominee through, and they're gonna be very happy if they do.
Yeah, I mean, epic rant there by Jayar, because it's absolutely true. Lindsey Graham has been atrocious before Donald Trump. He will remain atrocious after Donald Trump. He's just like sadder and more desperate now, and that's kind of, it adds a layer of patheticness, especially when he came groveling to Trump after saying he was a menace and racist and xenophobic. Like, he's in this no man's land where, who does he appeal to? Nobody, because he personifies weakness, and Republicans like to follow strong men. And he just came begging to Donald Trump after trying to eviscerate him. So he's really, you'd pity him if he wasn't so vile. Anyway, how do I really feel? Okay, let's move on to Fauci and Trump are at it again, per usual.
Yeah.
Donald Trump is getting desperate, so desperate that he's now trying to use Dr. Fauci's likeness for his reelection effort and taking his words out of context in advertisements that are airing in NFL games, which get NFL Red Zone so you don't have to see this crap. This is what the ad said.
President Trump is recovering from the coronavirus, and so is America. Together, we rose to meet the challenge, protecting our seniors, getting them life-saving drugs in record time, sparing no expense. President Trump tackled the virus head-on, as leaders should.
I can't imagine that anybody could be doing more.
We'll get through this together. We'll live carefully, but not afraid.
I love the two women touching noses, mask to mask. That's beautiful. That's Trump's America, right? And they're Aryan. That's perfect.
Oh, but there's a couple black guys. There's a couple young black guys. So, they must be supporters of Trump as well. We encompass everyone. Everyone can get the coronavirus. Oh, but suddenly there's masks on.
Yeah.
It's weird how that works.
Right. Yeah, that's like some weird porno that Trump likes. Okay, so the problem is that Dr. Fauci was not referring to Trump at all in that ad. As you may have suspected, Donald Trump and his team aren't exactly honest. And by the way, Trump has been publicly bashing Fauci, but now he needs him. So he's just splicing up his words and putting them in ads because he's down by double digits in almost every major poll. Besides being from all the way back in March when the coronavirus was still a very new issue and the cases and death toll were far lower, Fauci was praising the work of his fellow members on the White House Coronavirus Task Force and those in the agencies that were supporting their work. Fauci's words were not a compliment directed at the president, and he released a statement to CNN denouncing the ad as being made without my permission and characterized his comments as being part of a broad statement I made months ago about the efforts of federal public health officials. So Trump is trying to co-opt praise for healthcare workers. The doctor also reiterated that he had never publicly endorsed a political candidate. Trump responded to the whole kerfuffle on what else? His Twitter account retweeting a journalist who had quoted his campaign spokesman, Tim Murtaugh, calling the comments Dr. Fauci's own words. They are indeed Dr. Fauci's own words, tweeted Trump, praising himself for having done a phenomenal job and promising vaccines and cures long ahead of projections. But this is as the White House is literally trying to hide Fauci from the press, going above and beyond to make sure they're muffling him as Trump is using his face, his words out of context to try to get himself reelected. And Fauci says there that he's not going to endorse a presidential candidate. Guys, we all know it wouldn't be Trump. We all know it wouldn't be Trump. Let's be real here. So,
can I do one thing real quick?
Sorry, go on.
And before you go to the next horrible part of this, which actually is my favorite part of this story, which we'll get to. So you have Fauci coming out and having to put out a statement saying, "Oh yeah, he took my words out of context." And again, with the Trump administration or the campaign, maybe in this particular point, taking his words and maybe what if we just slice 5 to 6 to 10 words of anyone together? Yeah, those are your words. Like there's not even an attempt to hide it. Those are his words. Sure, at some point, Trump said the words, "I hate the United States of America." I can take those words and put them in one sentence and then say, "Those are your words, bro. You said it, right?" And then who's gonna buy into that? Nobody, because they're gonna see it as a joke. But they know their supporters will take any kind of an indication of having a chance to have a ridiculous, idiotic argument that means nothing and use it as some kind of a campaign rallying cry. It doesn't matter. So again, I always feel like I come back to that same question. Is it that they don't care, or is it that they think they're actually going to convince anyone? They're not going to convince anyone who knows, who is a normal thought process. The point is just to put it out there and have people talk about this enough that a few of them will glum on and go, "Hey, when they get into some kind of conservative circles, Dr. Fauci totally said that Donald Trump is doing the best job possible. There's nothing more he could possibly do." It's going to be used. It doesn't matter as long as you can use it.
Yeah, it's as cynical as possible. It's like playing on people's lack of information. And they're trying to literally, as I alluded to before, prevent Fauci from providing information because it shows how awful of a job Donald Trump has done with the response to COVID-19, with 210,000 Americans dead, plus all the things we know, an economic depression looming, an inability to get a second stimulus package, which we desperately need, and Pelosi's a little responsible for, by the way, but I'm going on a tangent. They're hiding Fauci from the press. ABC News' John Karl opened this week Sunday morning by calling out the White House over a lack of access to top health experts like Dr. Anthony Fauci. Karl said the White House wouldn't allow Fauci or other medical experts to appear on the show to talk about the ongoing coronavirus pandemic, and he made a point of saying Fauci himself was more than willing to join us. And this isn't even the first time one of the big Sunday shows has directly called out the White House on this topic. Of course, the White House disputes this, but Karl had receipts. He screenshotted his requests to the White House so that he could talk to Dr. Fauci on his news program when Alyssa Farah tried to say, "No, we definitely didn't try to hide Dr. Fauci from you, and you haven't emailed us or requested us." Well, he has the receipts, screenshots, boom, bang. What do you know? The Trump administration is lying about something.
I'm trying to figure out again, what is the motivation? Just say that he's too busy. Say that we don't want him on. We already know that. So again, who are you trying to fool? Because again, there was a subsequent tweet after this where was it Miss Farah, Alyssa Farah, where she had to admit after the receipts were put out there, because they'll only admit it once you've proven it to them 7 different ways, and then they'll quietly say something like, "Oh well, yeah, yeah, of course you're right, yeah, sure, yeah, you're right. Now that I see the receipts, but I get so many emails every day. I get a lot of emails every day too. I do. And if sometimes there are pitches from PR people who want to get someone on the show, and I haven't read them because I don't read many of them. Full disclosure. And if that same person runs into me in the streets because I happen to know them, they'd be like, "Hey, Jayar, did you get my email about getting someone on the show?" I'd be like, "I probably got it, but I definitely didn't read it." Anybody who knows me know that I'll say that about my email. Not that, "Oh yeah, you never sent it. Look at you, you're lying, fake news." Why go through all that? Just say you didn't read it because you didn't want him on the show. Is that going to turn anybody against you that's in support of you? No. So I honestly don't know the end game here.
Well, they don't think strategically. I mean, that's basically it. Like, Trump lucked into having a really potent election strategy in 2016 that was anti-establishment, and that's basically all he needed, and he hit Hillary in the right ways. But we've now seen, when it comes to governance, when it comes to basic strategy, when he is the one in power and not the brick thrower from the outside, him and his entire team, they've got no clue. And that's why they're down to Biden, who has no message and can't talk. So that's the reality.
Speaking of Biden and that messaging issue, we're going to talk about has that lack of messaging issue allowed him to let Trump back into the race? Or has his lead widened in some points? After Trump's, of course, COVID positive test and his subsequent immunity, superhuman abilities, whatever it is that happened after his
rich personitis, I think they call it. Rich personitis.
Let's find out how many people in the country love that rich personitis after we get back from this break.
At TYT, we frequently talk about all the ways that big tech companies are taking control of our online lives, constantly monitoring us and storing and selling our data. But that doesn't mean we have to let them. It's possible to stay anonymous online and hide your data from the prying eyes of big tech. And one of the best ways is with ExpressVPN. ExpressVPN hides your IP address, making your activity more difficult to trace and sell to advertisers. ExpressVPN also encrypts 100% of your network data to protect you from eavesdroppers and cyber criminals. And it's also easy to install. A single mouse click protects all your devices. But listen, guys, this is important. ExpressVPN is rated #1 by CNET and Wired magazine. So take back control of your life online and secure your data with a top VPN solution available, ExpressVPN. And if you go to expressvpn.com/TYT, you can get 3 extra months for free with this exclusive link just for TYT fans. That's expressvpn.com/TYT. Check it out today.
Hey everybody, welcome back yet again to the Young Turks. We've calmed down a bit, maybe, I don't know if we were yelling or not, but maybe it's the calming effects of some of the comments. Let's go straight to the super chat comments. This is for Emma and all my fellow Giants fans. It's been a depressing few years. Emma, you're the best. It has only been a few years though. I mean, I'm thinking back. There's some of the most exciting Super Bowl moments you guys.
Yeah, but I mean, we've never been a regular season dominant. Both those Super Bowl wins were like, okay, we gotta go, but yeah, we can talk about the first game. Yeah.
And from Twitch, subs, Comrade Kool-Aid, 2 months subs from him. Thank you. Tris305, 2 months as well. And Yeetwood Mac, 3 months. Woo. Who? One more thing. I'm not sure if this was your idea, Emma, but Void Queen also on Twitch said, I love the Mrs. Doubtfried hello line from Emma. Was that what you were going for when you came back with hello?
That was not, but no, that's just like me being socially awkward. So.
Emma is Mrs. Doubtfire somewhere deep inside.
I love that. That is a good reference. All right, our final story.
Yeah, let's see what else we got. Yeah.
Awesome. If you're wondering if Donald Trump's COVID diagnosis has affected his polling, well, it's taken a turn for the worse for sure. Now, we all understand where polling led us in 2016, but I think that as of now, it's a very different story. Biden's lead is widening as we get closer to the election when things tend to narrow in traditional elections. So an ABC News Washington Post national poll released Sunday found Biden leading Trump with likely voters by 12 percentage points, 54% to 42%, with the Libertarian and Green Party candidates together attracting just 3% of likely voters. So this is largely in line with all of the polling averages that we're seeing. A USC poll had Trump down 11, Pew had him down 10, so double digits pretty much across the board. And obviously a CNN poll from last week that got a lot of traction was 16 points. But Biden's in the lead, and doesn't really have to do much about it. So it shows Biden doubling his lead from the last ABC Post poll, which found Biden up 6 percentage points in late September. Biden's also doing well in swing states. A 538 polling average has Biden up 8 points in Michigan, 7.3 points in Pennsylvania, 7.2 points in Wisconsin. Those are all states that Hillary Clinton lost in 2016. She lost Michigan very narrowly by 0.3 percentage points, and the other two by less than 1 percentage point. So Biden being up there is significant in terms of the Electoral College. Biden is also competitive in states where Hillary Clinton lost significantly. So Biden's up by 1 in a 538 polling average in Iowa, which is crazy. And Biden's also up 0.7 in Ohio, which is trending more conservative. Biden also leads Trump by 3 or 4 percentage points in both Arizona and Florida, two additional states Trump won in 2016 that Democrats don't need to win to prevail in the Electoral College, although Arizona is significant for the Senate race. So Biden's not a shoo-in. Let's not get complacent. There have been studies that show that Biden needs to win the popular vote by over 4 points for it to be fairly comfortable. But this is encouraging and shows that Trump's COVID diagnosis just exposed his hypocrisy and failure on coronavirus even further, and it did not help him with any sympathy points like conspiracy theorists were theorizing.
Well, I'll start with the sympathy points and then going back to Superman points. And they can never really make up their minds, so they cover all bases. He's super weak. Don't say such mean things about him because you're anti-American. Oh, but he's so strong. Did you hear the quick report? I mean, I'm just gonna put it out there because I saw the headline. He had some discussions about wanting to walk out of Walter Reed with a Superman shirt on. I really hope that's fake news.
He should have done it. He should have done it. He should have done it. It would have been amazing.
Just like his on-air diagnosis on the Tucker Carlson show, or at least whatever the hell that was that he was trying to do on air. But this brings up, everyone knows, not even famously, but I say it as much as I can. I hate polls. I hate polls. I hate polls. And that's why I'm glad you brought up the point. It's not necessarily a shoo-in just because he's got this kind of lead. You still have to vote. I mean, saying you're gonna vote and go in a certain way and then doing it are two completely different things. So I just wanna make sure we still stick on that point that, it sounds so great, but there's many factors that'll keep people from wanting to go out and do it. Still go out and do it. Do whatever way you can to make it legitimate and get your vote in there.
Right. I mean, I totally agree with you. I just do think that, look, the polls were wrong along the margins in 2016. And I think you just also look at the dynamics of the race. You and I think, have a pretty good grasp on politics. And it was clear that Trump was running the better campaign in 2016. Biden is running the better campaign by default in 2020, and that's because Trump has messed things up so thoroughly. Yeah. The material conditions are just too bad, I think, for him to overcome at this point, but he could make it fraudulent and appeal to the Supreme Court with Amy Coney Barrett on the SCOTUS.
Stay tuned for that. Well, until next time, first of all, thank you guys for watching this. Emma, Vigeland, Jayar Jackson. See you next time on Young Turks.
Thanks for listening to the full episode of the Young Turks. Support our work, listen ad-free, access members-only bonus content, and more by subscribing to Apple Podcasts at apple.co/TYT. I'm your host, Cenk Uygur, and I'll see you soon.